BlackPantherPartyBreakfast@gmail.com or call 707-554-2784. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Ultra black, I got a toast to that. We don't fold the crack. We going occasion we rose to that. Going postal. We going ultra black. Watching the global change. Hopping the coldest range. Hit boy on the beat. This poster slap. We going ultra black. We going. Rhythm and blues, pop, rock, soul to jazz, to my toes attack. How I look being told, I'm not supposed to brag. Nobody fault, I tell the truth, I know what's facts. We ultra black, gray stone, skin tone, but multi that. Multiple colors, we come in all shades, mocha black. Except where I'm at and not fight me on it. Emotional stares like I might be wanted. Pitch black like the night, I'm ultra black. Sanford and Son reruns, jokes are black. Oh yes, oh yes.
KBLA Talk 1580. Happy Ultra Black History Month. Get into some Ultra Black history right about now with two world-renowned scholars. They lecture on African history, civilization, religion, and culture. They do lively, dynamic multimedia productions and videos and conduct African-centered tours of Egypt, a.k.a. Kemet. During these tours, they reveal startling and profound information on the African origin of many of the concepts and symbols now utilized in the Western world. Ashra and Merira Kwesi, good morning. Hotep, welcome.
Hotep, Sister Dominique.
Well,
Merira's on the line too.
Yes, good morning, Queen.
Good morning, sister.
I'm so happy that we finally got you guys on KBLA Talk 1580, and you're coming to town this weekend, so the timing is perfect. I've been saying that because there's so much pushback right now on everything black, the anti-blackness is so loud, and the erasure of history so loud, that we wanted to have an extra Black History Month. Your presentation this weekend, Ashra Kwesi, is on the African origins of civilization, which is a huge topic. But let's start there today.
Reclaiming our black genius from the books in stone. And it would be better if Merira starts first because she has to go and assist her father, if we can do that.
Oh,
please.
Okay. So we don't have Merira for the entire hour. Well, cultural destruction of African fashion. I think maybe we trivialize things like fashion and adornment, but they are very powerful symbols and very powerful currency, are they not?
Oh, definitely, because our fashion, African fashion, is a way of communicating, and it indicates social group, status, various styles and practices have deep meaning when we look at African fashion. And most of us, when we think of fashion, we think, oh, that's just for the sisters, or that's just a fashion show. But there's a lot more to fashion than that. Countless thousands of years ago, African people left a legacy of clothing, style, and beauty. So what we're going to show on Saturday is that Africa, mother of civilization, really gave fashion to the world.
We are still having this debate, aren't we, Merira? It's like, what is cultural appropriation? What is just inspiration? And when folks step into these traditional or symbolic adornments, do they even know what they are promoting or what they are announcing?
Many of the major designers know exactly what they're doing. For example, one of the garments that I'm going to show in the presentation on Saturday is the garment worn by the Maasai. It's called the shuka. Well, many of the Maasai garments have been appropriated, I call it stolen, by various companies. And the Maasai didn't have the ability to to be able to protect themselves against that thievery. And so what they're now trying to copyright the Maasai imagery, the garments. There's a Maasai intellectual property initiative in order to help the Maasai empower themselves and take legal action against these various fashion companies. But what has happened in the meantime is that Louis Vuitton actually patented the shuka, which is this a robe-like garment worn by the Maasai, and they actually took legal ownership of the Maasai heritage.
Wow, I did not know that. That's crazy. We visited the Maasai last year when we went to Kenya and Tanzania, and so I'm very well familiar, but I did not realize, and I just Googled it, and here it is. Louis Vuitton copies Maasai fabric.
Right. The other thing that's interesting about that, the Louis Vuitton symbol, you have the LV on the bags that you see, but there's also a little flower-like symbol. That was copied from the Kwele people of Gabon, Cameroon, and Congo. And that's because Gaston Vuitton, who was the grandson of Louis Vuitton, collected African masks. And during this period, when he was collecting the masks, they put that on their bags. But actually, they're still doing that to this day because Louis Vuitton copied the African mask and put it on shoes that they called spicy shoes that they sell for $2,200. And these are, like high heel shoes that they're using. They're using the African mask for that.
Wow. So, you, of course, you know better than anyone, the Louis Vuitton is a worldwide brand that makes a ton of money and costs a ton of money, and the Maasai are not the wealthiest people in the world. What do you think the odds are of that having any success?
I doubt that it will have very much success. And what's happening, too, is that in many of the countries on the African continent, they're kind of late in the game trying to copyright items of fashion because they had no idea that somebody would try to come and steal their clothing. For example, in Ethiopia, there's a dress worn by the women of Ethiopia. And it's one of the traditional dress. But a designer came and Matthew Williamson is his name. He went in and copied that design, and he wasn't designing; he was just copying, and he made that part of his collection. So now the Ethiopian government is trying to figure out ways to copyright the traditional dress of the people. But what has happened, too, is that we have on the African continent, that's happening quite a bit, and we see that a lot with items like the kente. In Ghana, that's a traditional cloth. And we are now getting cheap versions. They're mass-producing imitations of the kente. And a brother by the name of Ernest Asamoah talks about the kente and how that used to be a sacred garment or sacred cloth, and it's now being just copied and exploited, and they don't treat it with the respect that it deserves. But at one time, kente was so important that when Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's first president, became president, he wore kente for the most important events and for formal photos. And he used it as an emblem for Ghanaian culture. In fact, he had his whole cabinet to wear kente on formal pictures. In fact, when he didn't wear kente, he even wore the Batakari shirts, and that is what is worn in northern Ghana. And at one point, They were used as war shirts because the men would cover them with amulets, and they felt that when fired on by the British that they would not be hurt. So they felt that this cloth, the clothing, fashion actually had a serious power. When Nelson Mandela, in fact, was going into court in the 1960s, he wore the traditional royal garments. And because he wanted to give a visual image, he said he wanted to show that he was a black African walking into a white man's court. And when Winnie Mandela and her sister were coming to court, they also wore the traditional attire, and they were actually prohibited from doing so after the first day because it was too inspiring to the men on trial. So this shows the strength of African garments.
We are talking with Ashra Kwesi and Merira Kwesi, two of our most renowned black scholars here in the United States. We'll find out more about fashion. It's fascinating. Find out more about reclaiming our genius. And, of course, how you can be down if you want to go on a trip with them to the motherland. They've got not one but two because of popular demand coming up this summer. Ashra and Merira Kwesi, happy Black History Month from all of us at KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
Can your pad absorb everything and stay fresh? Always Radiant with Flex Foam can. Get up to 0 leaks, 0 odor, and 0 feel. Because Flex Foam is the only pad with a flexible foam core. You heard me, foam. Always Radiant is so thin, it feels like nothing, yet protects like nothing else. Can your pad do that? For up to 100% leak-free protection, try Always Radiant to see what Flex Foam can do for you.
I can't believe how spotless my floors look after using the Swiffer Power Mop. No more dragging around a heavy mop and messy bucket. Now I get the same deep clean without all the work. Thanks to the powerful solution and scrubbing pad of the Swiffer Power Mop, dirt and grime don't stand a chance, and I don't break a sweat. Mic drop. Mop drop.
Swiffer Power Mop. Swiffer Power Mop.
A smarter way to mop. Try it or your money back.
Life blooms in beautiful ways. The Afia Center invites you to celebrate At the End with Red Gala, honoring the strength and resilience of Black women living with HIV. Join us for an evening of empowerment as we launch the Barbara Cambridge Scholarship and kick off Herstory Month with our theme, Life in Full Bloom. Your support helps create vital HIV programming and builds a future where every voice is heard and every story matters. The End with Red Gala, because every flower deserves to bloom. To learn more and to donate, visit theafiacenter.org.
If you're living with dry age-related macular degeneration or dry AMD, you may be at risk for developing geographic atrophy or GA. GA can be unpredictable and progress rapidly, leading to irreversible vision loss. Now there's something you can do to
slow it down and get it going slower.
Izervay is proven to slow GA progression.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avacincaptad pagel is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
The conversation continues right now with Dominique DiPrima on First Things First.
Merira Kwesi and Ashra Kwesi, and of course Ashra Kwesi has asked that Merira go first because family duties call. But during News, Traffic, and Sports, Miles and I were just talking about the very many fashion controversies over the years. I remember the Gucci sweater that had a black face on it, and
Right.
H&M, the coolest monkey in the jungle, and there are others. It's as if these folks want to call us primitive and lacking in any artistic merit, but at the same time copy and pillage our intellectual property.
That's exactly right. and they come up with crazy names for the fashion shows. They'll call it exotic, erotic fashion shows. And even there was one, John Galliano, I think it was, had white models with cornrows, and they played bongo drums, and they called it Wild Africa. So even though they want the fashion, they want to try to belittle us in the process. But as I mentioned, cornrows, if we talk about cornrows, there's a real serious history that to the cornrows. And what I found is that the cornrows were in, like during the time of slavery, they were actually used as road maps, as a way to escape from slavery. And brothers and sisters, in fact, there was a brother in South America, Bencos Vallejo, and he was able to escape, and he formed a maroon community. And in order to help other brothers and sisters to escape, he had sisters to wear their hair in cornrows, and the various styles had different meanings. Like one, you might be planning to escape. Another style lets you know that troops are nearby. And then there was still another style where you could put seeds and gold in your hair so that you would have nourishment and have money when you did escape. So there's a very serious history behind the cornrows, in fact. There's a children's book even called Freedom Braids by Monique Duncan, and she talks about a young girl who was learning how to braid hair and eventually knew the styles and was able to escape from slavery. So this cornrows, and in fact they were called cane rows in South America, and they were called cornrows here because of the corn. It really depended on the type of agricultural product you were working with.
Wow. So, I mean, what are some of the symbols, other symbols that we see that become currency or that have messages and meanings that come out of Africa and become, commodified by the fashion industry?
Well, of course, I always go back to ancient Kemet, and many of the styles and practices that we use today came back from ancient Kemet. Even the world's oldest dress came from ancient Kemet over 5,000 years ago, and it was called the Tarkan dress. But we see our fashions every day, and in Kemet, they even introduced the underpants over 3,000 years ago. But we're told in the book 20,000 Years of Fashion that English women didn't even wear underpants until 300 years ago. So I always say we had them 3,000 years ago. They didn't even have them 300 years ago.
I mean, and it kind of makes sense if you think about just how, even though we're always being labeled as dirty, we're about the cleanest people I know.
Exactly. And in fact, when the Moors went into Spain, they were the preservers of Egyptian cultural traditions, and they brought silk and the cotton industry to Spain, but they also introduced soap, public baths, because Europe at that time was experiencing coprophilia, or a love of filth. And even in monasteries, they didn't take up to 4 times a year.
That's so terrible. So, Merira, what about us? Is there more we should be knowing and honoring in terms of the way we style and fashion ourselves? I know, happy birthday, Rihanna. Today's her birthday. She's seen as a fashion icon. Her man, A$AP Rocky is. Yesterday they got the big victory of being found not guilty. But many times we see them in European fashions, and we see ourselves. But we, of course, always take European fashion and give it more swagger or more energy. But do you think we are we are missing the boat in terms of understanding the symbolism and the traditions of our own ancestors?
Yes, well, it's really important to research and really understand the fashion of our ancestors. In the 1960s, in fact, they wanted to try to bring about a feeling of empowerment for African people, and there was a group out of New York, the Grandassa Models, and Lombe Brath and his brother Kwame Brathwaite started to have a fashion show as part of their African Jazz Art Society. And they used a group of black women who wore African clothing and natural hair. And the title of each show was called Naturally. And so it was to bring about a political aspect to the clothing, to understand who we are globally, because the way you dress and the way you wear your hair is actually political.
Yeah. I was watching some documentary on Netflix about fashion, and I didn't know about this so-called Battle of Versailles back in the day, where the French had a fashion contest with the Americans, and I guess it's legendary because the black women and the swagger of those black women made the U.S. victory, what it was, and it's, I guess, legendary in the fashion industry. I did not know that. But I can see it because clearly, beyond just the tradition, just the way we style things, even in European tradition, is impactful.
Right. And you see it up and down the runways, and many of the so-called fashion designers are copying various aspects of the fashion. You see the afro wigs, the locks, the cornrows. You see all of that. They will take various parts of the styles and symbols. Like there was one where they took some of the crowns from ancient Kemet and wore that. But all it is just to have a fashion show, but not to really discuss the meaning behind it. And that's something that I always feel that we should really do. We should understand the importance of the clothes we wear. Your clothes should help tell who you are and what you're about. There's a person by the name of S.M.E. Bengu, and he wrote a book called Chasing Gods Not Our Own. And he said that dress is not only a means of asserting identity, it projects a culture and personality. And it's a means of expression, and it can have an impact in both international or intercultural relations. So we really have to pay attention to the type of messages that we're transmitting when we wear clothes.
What did you make of Ketanji Brown Jackson, the Supreme Court Justice, rocking her cowrie shells?
I didn't see that. I missed that one. But that cowrie shell, that's an ancient symbol of African people. In fact, in Kemet, they looked at it as a symbol of fertility because of its similarity in shape to the female anatomy. And so the cowrie shells all throughout the African continent have been extremely important.
Yeah, well, she wore a huge cowrie shell collar to the inauguration, and I thought it was rather amazing. I thought it was pretty rebellious of her to do so. I know we only have you for a couple more minutes. I wonder if you would remind us about how we can see the in-depth lecture that you're doing on this topic, and with pictures and visuals and questions and answers, as well as if you would like to mention a little bit about the trips.
Okay. Yes, Brother Abib with Afropedia has invited us to come to the L.A. area, and we'll be there on Saturday, February 22nd. The doors open at 4. This will be at the Black Lives Matter Center in Leimert Park, 34 153 West 43rd Place. And this will be a double presentation. I'm going to give the multimedia production, the cultural destruction of African fashions, and my husband, my Neterhetch, Ashra Kwesi, will do a presentation on the African origin of civilization, reclaiming our black genius from the books in stone. Both are visually documented. And so we won't just stand there and talk about it. We'll actually show it. And you'd ask about our tours. We have our Kemet Nu Know Thyself educational tours this summer. The first trip, both of them are to Kemet, to Egypt. First trip is July 12th through the 26th. And the second one is July 28th through August 11th. And we still do have some spaces available, and they can visit our website, kemetnu.com. That's KEMETNU.com, and they can find out more about the trips.
Well, Merira Kwesi, it's a pleasure to talk with you again, and I appreciate the conversation, very thought-provoking. And we'll be talking about reclaiming our black genius from the books in stone with your husband, Ashra Kwesi, when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580. Thank you again.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. A police officer in Lawrence, Indiana is on administrative leave after a video went viral showing the officer hitting a man being held down. The video was posted on social media by Black Indy Live. The incident is under investigation by Internal Affairs. Kamala Harris is signing with Creative Arts Agency for representation in speaking engagements and publishing. President Trump signed an executive order to eliminate federal funds for undocumented migrants and ensure no funds encourage illegal immigration. The National Immigration Law Center notes undocumented immigrants aren't eligible for most federal benefits. And former boxer Floyd Mayweather Jr. is reportedly aiming to buy a 10% stake in the New York Giants for $700 million. Giants legend Eli Manning also expressed interest in buying a part of the team. The Giants are valued at around $7.5 billion. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
If you or someone you know is affected by the Los Angeles wildfires, you are not alone. No matter how sad, scared, or heartbroken you feel, Cal Hope is here for you and all those affected by the devastating wildfires. Find free, safe, and confidential mental health support at calhope.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Tennis legend Venus Williams was given a wildcard exemption to play in next month's B&P Paribas Open at Indian Wells, California. The Compton native, now 44, will play a first-round match on March 5th. Venus has not played since the Miami Open in 2024. While UCLA is celebrating a very talented women's basketball team, ranked number 1 in the country for 12 weeks, was 23-0, and now ranked number 3 in the nation, things are a lot different for the UCLA men's program. The Bruins lost at home to Minnesota Tuesday night 64-61 after missing 10 free throws in the second half, including 6 straight in the final 3 minutes. Bruins coach Mick Cronin laid some of the blame on UCLA fans for his team's collapse, saying the fans groaned too much after the missed free throws. This is Cronin's 6th season at UCLA. It'll be interesting to see if he's around for a 7th. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio that's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Fatherhood includes being present during pregnancy, delivery, and beyond, supporting your partner and advocating for your baby's health. Black fathers play a key role in reducing maternal and infant health inequalities. Join the free AIM Fatherhood Program and make a difference. Visit blackinfantsandfamilies.org/fatherhood.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. Your info is in endless places that could expose you to identity theft, leading to lost funds. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year with promo code NEWS. Visit lifelock.com. Terms apply.
If you're living with dry age-related macular degeneration or dry AMD, you may be at risk for developing geographic atrophy or GA. GA can be unpredictable and progress rapidly, leading to irreversible vision loss. Now there's something you can do to
slow it down, get it going slower.
Izervay is proven to slow GA progression.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avacincaptad pagel is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
We're not for everybody, but we're for everybody. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
And it's an honor to have Ashra and Merira Kwesi with me this morning as we celebrate Black History Month and their upcoming appearance on Saturday at BLM LA Center for Black Power in Leimert Park. Ashra Kwesi, it's been far too long. Your half of the lecture will be Reclaiming Black Genius from the Books in Stone. Let's start with the basics. What are the books in stone, and why do we need to reclaim our genius there?
Oh, yes, Dominique. Well, it's again a great honor to be back on your new show. I think it's my first time being on your show. Before it was the other station, KGLH, but it's an honor to be on this one. Again, yes, I refer to the books in stone, Sister Dominique, related to the Neterhets. Neterhet means divine houses, or world divine houses. Those are the temples of ancient Kemet. For 43 years, and giving respect to my teacher, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, 14 years apprenticeship under him, I've been able to research and study these books in stone and monuments and temples to reveal the black genius from the books in stone. So that's why I refer to it as the books in stone, because they truly are the books in stone. There's nothing like it on the planet Earth, where our ancestors for thousands of years have documented information as though they knew that one day the story would not be told, so they made sure that they put it on the books in stone. So in my presentations over the years, covering the areas of civilization, religion, and culture, I've been able to reveal this information. Unfortunately, we don't see it in our educational system in the Western world. In fact, they've done everything to try to deny it through their own racism, especially coming up with the whole Afrocentrist myth. And we know not long ago, Mary Liskell was not out of Africa. I mean, the insanity, as Bobby Wright referred to this as, this is a psychopathic racism. I mean, when you have all the evidence and the monuments and temples that are there, in fact, the oldest and largest on the planet Earth, referred to as Ra-Haru-Em-Akhet, that the Greeks referred to as the Sphinx. For many, many millenniums, that all the invading armies that came into Africa, this is the first thing they had to look at. And this great colossal here, clearly anyone looking at that colossal, as Count Voney and others who came there, and Count Voney who revealed the African origin of this colossal in his book, Ruins of the Empire. And it is said that Thomas Jefferson refused for that book to be published in the United States. But anyway, anyone looking up at that colossal right there can clearly see that this is a African colossal. So that is what we see that through this whole, I refer to as the European Egyptology, because when we say Egyptology, we're referring to the colonial period when Napoleon came into Egypt in 1798, and that started the whole severing of Egypt out from Africa, especially with the what's his name? I can't think of his name right off the top of my head. But this particular European who pretty much cut Egypt out of Africa. And this is how most people, when you think of saying, I'm going to Egypt, and people say, well, Egypt is not in Africa. And it's mainly because of the academic racism that they have created to cut Egypt out of Africa.
You're talking about Alexander the Great? Supposedly
no, I'm not talking about
the so-called great.
Well, there's nothing great about him. You don't you don't refer to someone who's a plunderer who comes in as great. I mean, that actual name great was taken from Menkaperatuti Mays the Great over 3,000 years ago, who had 17 battles and won them all. So that's what the term. In fact, they called him the Napoleon of his day. How could he be Napoleon of his day? And he was thousands of years before Napoleon. But Hegel was the name. Hegel was the name I was, had a mental lapse there. Hegel was the one who actually said that Egypt was part of the European world. So they literally cut Egypt out of Africa, so that's part of the European world, and Egypt does not belong to Africa. But when we deal with that fallopian tube, and I refer to the fallopian tube, and that is the 4,000, approximately 200 miles of the Happy Valley, and that is the Nile itself. Not only coming from the Great Lakes regions of Africa around Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya, around Lake Nyanza, even though they say it by the colonial name Lake Victoria, but that's Lake Nyanza, and also the Abai, or the Blue Nile, as James Bruce would call it, the Blue Nile, and said he discovered the Blue Nile. People are already there, but he's discovering it. Ethiopians are already there. But coming from the highlands, this is the cultural highway that early Africans and even the leakies who let it leak out that African people were the first people on the planet Earth and validating through their own anthropology. So we see the zenith of all of this is right there in Kemet, that the Greeks referred to as Egypticus, thus we get the name Egypt today. But the ancient name was called Kemet, and Kemet literally means black. In fact, we use Kemet in our name in terms of our tour called Kemet Nu, that literally means black people. Kemet Ta meaning the black land. So this is the information over the years and documenting the information on the books in stone. And in the African origin of civilization, I start off with the first people who migrated down that fallopian tube, who started their beginning, and that's the little Batwa. And I visited them in Uganda, and had to go up into way on top of this mountain. In ancient times in Kemet, they were called the Dancers of God. And there's documentation in Ta-Nehisi, or what is referred to as Nubia today, on the books in stone, where Harkuf, who made an expedition for his Nisu, or king, Pepi, that he wanted him to bring back the first Twa, that they acknowledged them as the first people. They're called Bes in Egypt. And one of the books in stone called the Neterhet, or divine houses going into the temple, they have a statue of the Lotwa, and they're always on top of the temples, on the columns. And, of course, if one doesn't know the history, and some of the Europeans who come in there will give the derogatory name, look at the little pygmy. Well, they were not little pygmies. They were the little Twa that our ancestors acknowledged, and they're on top of this Menmizi house. Well, the Menmizi house, Dominique, means the birth house. This is where the birthing took place at. So what's the best representation for birth? They acknowledged the little Twa. They didn't have any type of derogatory representation of them in ancient Kemet. They saw them as the seed people of humanity. They saw them as the first people who came down and migrated down that fallopian tube, carrying with them many symbols, that we see. In fact, we see pockets of these Twa all over the world. Like I said before, I visit them in Uganda, but when I was in Japan and I went to the highlands, and you see the Ainu people, they have little froze, and I see, and what's shocking is that the little Twa in Kemet, you always see them with their tongue sticking out, and they're identical in Japan. Let's look in Mindanao, the southern part of the Philippines. Equally, we see the Twa. So you see the pockets of these first people who, in fact, migrated up out of Africa and migrated around the world. All right, and had nothing to do with any slavery. Had nothing to do to taking them there. So so in this presentation, I start off the whole presentation with the Lotois, and they're going into the dynastic period of ancient Kemet. So we can see the images and representations and the phenotype of these early Africans, because we're dealing with now with Europeans who are trying to erase the blackness of ancient Egypt, and trying to say that this was a European civilization. Well, if it was a European civilization, Dominique, would they have robbed many of these colossals and carried them off? Would they dig up the cots that we refer to as mummies? Okay, literally ripping off their heads, and it's sad to see even today. King Tutankhamun, okay, who's over 3,000 years ago, why would they have his cot or his mummy laid out there in his tomb? I mean, thousands of people go there and to go look at his body. You're not going to put George Washington on display. You're not going to put King James on display. All right, the Europeans would not do this. So if it's supposed to be a European civilization, why would they have the representation of these great Nessus and kings and queens on display for people to gawk at, look at, and laugh at? So this is the importance of us revealing this information, and above all, dealing with the genius that African people brought to the world. Okay, the fact that we are looking at this whole Western time period, that in their own documentaries they talk about how the Western world even got time itself without a Kemet. Now, even though Cleopatra, and I will deal with her in the lecture, because in my arguments way back in the 80s and 90s, I would argue with professors that why would they start time with Cleopatra? Okay, because that's during the Ptolemaic period. All right, now, even though we know when the Greeks came in, they didn't come in there with their wives, all right, but at the same time, that's not, we know that that time period of Ptolemies, that's that time period. But when we look at Nefertari the First and look at many of the other African queens, they don't talk about them because there were no Greeks yet. But in any case, my point is that in one of these documentaries, and I watch these documentaries because they reveal a lot of truth in them sometimes, and they talk about how Julius Caesar got the concept of time from Cleopatra, who had studied the ancient African Kemetic knowledge that was thousands of years before her, that was housed in the library of Alexandria, that was plundered by the Greeks, okay, who came in, where the Ptolemies built that library after they plundered those netherheads or temples. So here we see that time itself was based off of ancient Kemet, all right, and this is how the Western world even got time itself. But every time we write 2025, we're adhering to a Western time. But the next question is, how do you count time down and then start back up, Dominique? They literally erased the African time. Okay. So also there's a Neterhet, or divine house, in the books in stone. And this temple is dedicated to the great Shemsu Haru. Now, the Shemsu Haru were the followers of Haru. Now, this goes into a deeper story. I'm not going to talk about that right now. But what's important about this temple is that this temple is referred to as the Zodiac Temple because it has 6 zodiacs in there. And that tells us that these first Shemsu Haru were the first astrophysicists. The most famous of this zodiac is the circular one in the ceiling of that temple right there. And now what's important about this is that there's a Neteru holding a portion of the zodiac, so we know that there's 12. All right, that gives us a great year of 25,000 years. Now, every time you write 2065, the Western world has not experienced a great year yet. A great year consists of a time period of 2,155 years. See, so this is the fear of us unlocking the sacred knowledge of ancient Kemet, the ancient African knowledge of the Nile Valley that African people documented thousands of years ago. But the sad thing is they have our young people into mystical worlds now. They got our people into extraterrestrials and Anunnakis, and as long as their mind is outside of Africa, like Jomo Kenyatta said, they gave us the Bible and told us to pray, and we opened our eyes up. They had all of Africa, and we had the Bible. All right. So today, to keep our young people's mind out of Africa, all right, and keep their minds away from this sacred knowledge, now we see that they're talking about all these extraterrestrials. Like one young man came to me and on the tour and said, Kwesi, are these the pyramids that the Anunnakis built? Now this is the Great Pyramid of Eket Khufu. And you got the statue. That's the other thing. You got the statues there. The colossal statues are there. You can see the images and the representations and the phenotype looking just like the young man who asked me the extraterrestrial. So I said, I'm not going to kick your behind that statement. I'm going to kick your mind. All right. And at the end of the presentation, he apologized. Okay. I mean, at the end of the tour, he apologized for making that statement. And I talked about the whole spiritual idea of our ancestors, keen observation. They had an empirical observation of Mut Netchit. Mut Netchit is the Medu Neter name that we see how the name Mother Nature came out of that name. Mut Netchit, Mother Nature came out of Mut Netchit. So they observed something, okay, in Mut Netchit or Mother Nature. They saw that everything in nature is in a spiral. Whether we're looking at leaves, whether looking at whatever we see in nature, whether you're looking at your fingerprint, it's in a spiral. In the center of your head, okay, we see it comes out. Your hair comes out in a spiral. The nebulas of the universe are in a spiral. So they built these mirrors that the Greeks referred to as pyramids. All right, ancient Kemet didn't call them pyramids; they were called mirrors. They built them inside out in a spiral. But the sad thing is our children go to school, and the first thing that they are taught that Fibonacci, okay, so-called gave us the whole idea of the golden ratio. That's what's referred to as the science of nature of Mut Netchit in the spiral, everything in the spiral. They said Fibonacci is the one that gave the world that. No, Fibonacci did not give the world that. That was already known in Kemet. Also, when I was in Uganda, okay, I was in a place called Ugongo. Igongo, this little city is famous, Sister Dominique. It's famous because they have a whole museum of how they said the whole idea of the golden ratio. There, that they discovered the golden ratio, and they have it there. In fact, the people walk around with golden ratios on their shirts. They have golden ratios in the museum to validate that knowledge was carried down the Nile. All right. It was carried down the Nile, and it reached its zenith right there in Kemet. So when we look at the mirrors, all right, we're looking at the time period that it was thousands of years before those pyramids for that science to even develop to get there to build the 7 million tons of masonry, 2,300,000 stones of Eket Khufu's pyramid, not no extraterrestrials. Who built this? And it's only on the African continent. It seems as though there had to be somebody else, extraterrestrials or somebody else who have done this. They don't say the Parthenon was built by extraterrestrials. They don't say the Wailing Wall or Asia or nobody. Only in Africa. It's associated with spacemen and extraterrestrials. And one of the images that I show in my presentation is that they recently found an Egyptian man, as they refer to today, or should I say, the Kemetian man, the African Kemetic man. Okay, but as they got it in this science article, they said through photogrammetry that they were able to see that this earliest Egyptian man clearly showing to him as an African. And it was interesting. He looked just like Lawrence Fishburne. Right? Now, the other thing is, the sad thing is that Lawrence Fishburne is one of the, he's a brother that's on the History Channel, okay, always talking about extraterrestrials built the pyramids. So I think Lawrence Fishburne, I think if we can get him back to Kemet so he would not associate the building of these great mirrors, okay, built by Kemetic Africans in the Nile Valley with some extraterrestrials and so forth. So, of course, when young black men watch Lawrence Fishburne on the History Channel, then this saturates their mind that their ancestors, that's in their genetic memory bank, peace be upon him, as Dr. Richard King would say, an ancestral genetic memory bank, that it's our ancestors who actually built this. Okay, so how can our young youth and their black genius open up if they are looking at outside Africa or looking at somewhere else or extraterrestrials and all this? And this thing, I didn't realize how big it was until so many young people who come to Kemet with us, and that's the first thing they say. And when you got multi-genius like Imhotep, who built the world's first stone building over 5,000 years ago for his Nesu king Zoser Neterket. See, so this is the brain drain is going to happen if we allow this to happen, Sister Dominique.
So much information in a small amount of time, but kemetnew.com is where you can go if you want to take this educational trip to Kemet, a.k.a. Egypt, with Ashra and Merira Kwesi. Someone couldn't stay on the phone but wanted to know your thoughts on the discovery of this new discovery of Thutmose II that was announced by the Egyptian government, saying that it was the first such discovery since King Tut. I want to say, too, when I went to see the Tut exhibit, they clearly have models and what they write on the exhibits set up to make you believe these folks are white and European. And the Egyptian government, you see the reaction to the Cleopatra documentary and the way that they are doubling down. It seems that they are hell-bent on making people think that these folks are Arab descended folks. So talk about Thutmose II and talk about the appropriation by the Egyptian government.
Well, first of all, the Arabs came as invaders in 641 AD. That's a historical fact, all right? And this is long after the whole African Valley civilization. But they are always digging up and plundering ancient Kemet, and the next thing is, why are they digging them up in the first place? These are sacred burial grounds. First of all, Dominique, they're not going to go into Europe, and most of these digs are by European Egyptologists. As I said in the beginning, that the whole thing of science that they refer to as Egyptology was started by the Europeans when Napoleon came in. So this is a whole European thing, and most of them are European Egyptologists over there doing these digs. So, again, when you look at Menkaperatu Dimes II, this is his Kemetic name that they call Thutmose, okay? That is Queen Hatshepsut's, again, husband, all right? So, again, this is an ongoing plundering. It's nothing new. We see this taking place from the time of when Carter came in November 1922 and dug up the riches and tombs of King Tutankhamun. In fact, he didn't discover it at all. Okay, it was Sheikh Abdul-Nati, and who I knew his son. Sheikh Abdul-Nati was back during the time of Carter, but he's the one that showed Carter where the tomb was at. And like I said before, if it's supposed to be European, would they desecrate it like that? Would they have King Tutankhamun out there stretched out? And even when they brought it here, you spoke of when they brought King Tutankhamun's exhibits here. I first saw it back in the 70s, 1978, when they first brought it here. And they refused to bring the gold mask, the gold mask of King Tutankhamun, because the United States damaged. There's a big dent in the back of the Nemes crown. That's referred to as the crown of Nemes. There's a big dent in the back of it. That was done in the United States. So did somebody purposely take a hammer and smash his mask? So they don't let that mask go out of the country now because of that. But anyway, when they came through the second time around, and I think that's the time that you're referring to when you saw it.
Yeah.
This is where they put an image of like a Boy George image of King Tut. Now, first of all, they had a bust, in the tomb of King Tutankhamun from 3,000 years. They made a bust. What was wrong with that bust? Was that bust too melanated? Was there too much melanin in that bust? Why would they have to make a Boy George image of King Tutankhamun? And then said that he may have been from Africa. I mean, Egypt is part of Africa. It's in the northeast corner of Africa. And then they constantly refer to that his image was a European or Caucasoid look. Well, first of all, let's be clear on something. African people are the only people on the planet Earth that has all the variations of phenotypes. In other words, we got thin nose, wide nose, thick lips, and thin lips. All right, I've traveled throughout the African continent. I can see the variations. There's various shades of black, and some of these things I'll be showing in the presentation. Various shades of black. This is all part of the psychopathic racism, of the European Egyptologists who are trying to deny, because now they want to claim it. In fact, trying to even use to a certain extent African people, and making that a whole issue because Egypt has called for the return of a lot of the colossals and many of the treasures that they stole out of Egypt. All right, so they want to try to shut that down. They just built a new museum, and they want the treasures and the colossals that Belzoni and also, what's his name, Dravidi, and Henry Salt. These are the early Europeans who came in and plundered. In fact, Dominique, this was taking place at the same time that African people were being kidnapped from the African continent. It was the same time that they were stealing and plundering the treasures of Africa. That's another thing that we have to be clear on. That when we go to these European museums, whether it's the Louvre or whether it's the British Museum, that I've been to all of those museums, and we see those treasures there, it was through thievery. It was the robbing of these colossal statues, okay, the Belzoni and Gioviti and Henry Salton and others, okay. And then now when you have others like Josiah Knott and George Glidden, and they trying to explain now the African image and the phenotype of the Africans, and they said they may have had a Negroid features, but no Negro blood. In fact, on the second floor of the Cairo Museum that I take our groups every year, people from all over the world read this. Maspero, who was the curator of this museum that they built in the early 1900s, okay, and here Mariette, who's a big statue outside that museum. In fact, they were stealing so much stuff out of Egypt that Mariette said, look, we're just stealing too much. Let's leave some in Egypt. So they built a statue for him, and because he decided to don't steal everything. It's like somebody coming into your house, a burglar, and they steal so much stuff out of your house that they say, let's just leave a couple things in here. We're just taking too much. All right. So they built a statue of him to honor that. But Mariette is the one that started to build this museum. Who was involved in building the old museum, the Cairo Museum. But it was Maspero, his student, who's the one who actually was the curator. And to this day, there's a plate that Maspero put on the second floor. And what does it say on that plate that people read this all over the world about Maharpra? Maharpra, you got the picture of him up there. Clearly, you can see he's a very melanated brother, okay, meaning that he's black, all right? That's what melanin is, black color, all right? And it's the 18th dynasty. That means it's over 3,000 years ago. So I guess in Maspero's mind, he had to make it clear to everybody that he puts a plate right under the picture. He's Negroid, but not actually a Negro.
Ashra Kwesi, we're going to have to leave it there. I hope you'll come back again. I hope this won't be the last time.
Oh, okay. So again, we're going to be at the Black Lives Matter, okay, at 3423 West 43rd Place, okay, in African town, Leimert Park, and we want to give thanks to Afripedia and Brother Abid for putting this African Community, as Bobby Wright would call it. And Dominique, it's an honor, and again, it's been a long time, and that we've been on the show, and it's an honor that Mary and I were on today. So
absolutely.
It's a lot of information.
Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. We've got Dr. Brittany Friedman next on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.